What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Your guys, Cody and Derek, back for another episode, guys. And in today's episode, we want to talk rookies. Let's talk the rookies. The Colts had 12 picks, the most in, I think, the Colts history in the modern era since like 94, something like that. So with that being said, we wanted to kind of look at all these rookies, the draft pick rookies, that is, and talk about some guys that we feel like maybe will have more of an impact, less of an impact from day one. What is the level of impact for each of these draft picks? Just for making it simple, we're just going to go 1 to 10 on the kind of impact we think they're going to have. So we'll start here with the first round guy here that we already know. Got their guy, Anthony Richardson, quarterback out of Florida. Derek, there's been some questions on if he's going to start or not, but in terms of 1 to 10, what kind of impact from day one do you think Anthony Richardson's going to have?
Well, obviously, he's going to have the biggest impact negatively or positively because, he's now the quarterback of this franchise. So it'll be interesting to see what they do. Now, we have never gotten a specific answer on whether or not he is actually going to be the quarterback day one. We haven't gotten that answer yet. My guess is that he will, but at the end of the day, we don't 100% know yet. But either way, Anthony Richardson has to have the biggest impact because of just what it relies upon for him. What we saw this last year with terrible quarterback play. If Anthony Richardson can even be semi-competent compared to that, then we will see this team do a lot better in terms of offensive production this next year. And you know what? Even at the end of the day, even if things don't go great this first year for Anthony Richardson, at least this next year, this offense is going to be a hell of a lot more fun. That's going to be the best part about this, is knowing that it may not be a great product next year, but it's going to be a lot more fun to watch with Shane Steichen mixing some things up. And you have a lot more speed back there in the backfield now. So it'll be much more interesting to watch on Sundays rather than what we saw last year.
Gotcha. So what, out of 10, what would you give Richardson here?
Out of 10, I'm definitely giving it a 9 out of 10, because this is one of the best situations that you can possibly get yourself in with Anthony Richardson. Just all depends on whether or not Steichen can get him to unlock his true potential.
I think I'm just going to go at 8 because we could see him early on not play all the games. And I think just for that reason, I think you're right. When he's on the field, he's going to impact them one way or another. But I just do question, is he ready just with the lack of experience? He may be, and maybe that'll go up to a 9 or a 10. But as it stands right now, where we currently stand on Tuesday, May 9th, I'm going to go with an 8 just for right now. And we'll see. If he plays, that's definitely going up. All right, let's move on to the Colts' second-round selection, number 44 overall, Kansas State cornerback, Julius Juju Brents, had a wrist injury, had some surgery on that, so he's going to probably miss some time up to probably training camp. But when the regular season comes along, he's probably going to play a lot. So what would you say, Derek, for Juju Brents here?
Well, from an impact standpoint, I would imagine that he's probably going to be, one of the more impactful guys, because you're going to be filling that role of probably the number 2 corner in this entire defense from an outside standpoint. So, you also have to fill in, obviously, for the role of what Stefan Gilmore was. So that's big, because not only are you filling in for what was a good corner last year, you're filling in for a great corner last year that won you a lot of games last year with his great defense. That's a lot to take in for a young guy, especially an unfinished guy in Julius Brent. So he will definitely have the second biggest impact of this entire team, because he's in a position where it's either him or it's another rookie or undrafted guy stepping in for him that's going to end up, having to fill up for that role. And then the defense is riding on it.
So if you give Richardson a 9, what does that mean Juju gets for you?
For me, from a the most impactful, oh man, I mean, I would have to say it's right there at a 9 with him. I mean, I can't say it's any lower because if you think about it, if Julius Brents goes lower and if Julius Brents ends up not being good next year, it's a bad recipe for the Colts defense because now you have a weakness. Now you have a soft spot on that defense that teams can attack. And we saw last year what that was like going up against Kenny Moore and Brandon Faison last year, what that kind of weakness was being attacked. But if you have it on the outside now with where Stefan Gilmore was from before, you're gonna be struggling on defense.
Yeah, I definitely would go at 9. I think he's going to play regardless. I think he's going to be your week 1 starter. And that's why I have a little bit higher than Richardson, just because there's not a question for me that he's going to be the starter. And he's going to play a lot of snaps right away. And he's going to maybe even be that number 1 outside corner. We'll see what happens with Rodgers. But yeah, I think he's definitely a guy that's going to have an impact from day 1, no question. All right, let's move on now to the third round, pick number 79 overall, North Carolina wide receiver Josh Downs. What do you give him?
I got to give him, I would say, now I'm going to just say this just from an aspect of importance and impact. Probably will go with a 7 because, you have other wide receivers in the grand scheme of things that are going to get involved in this offense, specifically Alec Pierce as well, because of what he entails. But I mean, obviously Josh Downs is going to have a huge impact because of being in the slot and being a favorite of Anthony Richardson. But like I said, there's other wide receivers on the outside, and Josh Downs is not going to be the 100% slot receiver next year. There's going to be some Isaiah McKenzie thrown in there. There's going to be other packages in which he's not going to be out there. So, a 7 I think is fair because it's not nearly as impactful as Anthony Richardson or as Julius Brents, but it is going to be huge for Anthony Richardson to get connected with Josh Downs to try and get those chains moving a lot more.
Right. All right, let's move on now to the fourth round. Pick 106, BYU offensive tackle Blake Freeland.
From 1 out of 10, I'd probably give this one a 5 because I can't go much higher than that because Blake Freeland is not going to start right away. Just ultimately depends on if a Bernard Ryman or if a Braden Smith were unfortunately to get injured, then we would see what kind of impact Blake Freeland would have. I think he's a great solid backup, which is why I would give this a 5, but I can't give it any higher because we know he's most likely not going to play unless one of these guys ends up getting injured.
Yeah, it's like a 5 that could go up to a 10 real fast if that does happen. Now, obviously, you hope it doesn't, but yeah, I think you could see him in some packages. You could use him in different ways. If Ryman, I don't know if he's necessarily would win the battle at all, but I think he could definitely push Ryman and make him better at left tackle. And I think he's just going to fill in on both sides. He can play both. He's played both in college, and so I kind of view that as like a guy that, could play and fill in some snaps if need be. And I think he will be kind of that, 6th offensive lineman, if you will. Certainly that swing tackle, which is oh so important. So I would agree with you. I'd say like a 4-5 around there just because he's not going to play, but he very easily could, and he probably will play a little bit, but he's not going to play every snap like these other 2 guys probably. So definitely agree with you there. All right, let's move on now to the other pick. Adetomiwa Adebawari, Northwestern defensive lineman, is going to play probably that slide in as that backup 3 technique position. And this is different, Derek, than an offensive lineman because the Colts do and teams do rotate defensive linemen a ton in here. And so what kind of impact could he have?
Oh, man. I think he's a 6 right off the bat to potentially going to a number 7. I mean, it just truly depends on how many snaps he gets as a defensive tackle this next year. I mean, he's a guy that's, if he makes it through camp, which I presume he will, he's going to end up being a guy that is going to have a huge role in this defense because if you're going to be taking snaps away from DeForest Buckner and Grover Stewart on pass down situations, that's a situation where you need to be prepared for that. And I think that he has a very unique skill set that can help him in ways different than what Eric Johnson even could last year. So I'd probably go with a 6. And if things go well, he might end up be a 7.
Yeah, we'll see. I think he does have a little bit more impact than Freeland right off the bat. So I would say, yeah, if I give Freeland a 4 or 5, I'd probably give him a 6 or a 7. So would agree with you there. All right, let's move on now to a guy here, another DB the Colts took out of South Carolina in the 5th round, the top of the 5th round, cornerback Darius Rush.
That's a tough one because, I mean, at the end of the day, I don't know how much time he's going to get because of Julius Brents. I would probably put him in the same boat with Adetomiwa, a 6 or maybe even a 7. Just depends on what kind of role the Indianapolis Colts have in mind for him. How many snaps does he actually get? Because I think he can compete right there with Julius Brents for that number 2 corner spot. I think Brent's going to end up taking it, but Darius Rush could be a guy that, just like Adetomiwa, if he gets snaps, the guy can make some plays. So I'll go with a 6.
Yeah, I'd probably go with a 7, just because that cornerback room is so wide open right now. I really do view it as like anybody could win that competition. I really do think that at this point, with this corner room and how young it is, and Isaiah Rodgers, he's not really the typical size for a Gus Bradley corner, so you do wonder, like, does that play a factor? Now, I will say he definitely did get a lot more playing time over Faison at the end of the year, so maybe Gus Bradley kind of feels a little bit differently about him than maybe we think, but yeah, I do think he's a guy that you think if he's going to factor in as maybe like your backup outside corner / 4th cornerback. I mean, I think he still will play a significant amount of snaps, right? And just like with Freeland, if an injury happens, I mean, he could easily be in the starting lineup pretty quickly. So I think he's definitely a guy that's going to have a lot of impact. A guy that I think, even though he's a 5th round pick, he's not like a traditional 5th round pick, right? People are thinking he was like a day 2 guy. So I think he could definitely compete in there. He could definitely do some nice things at the corner room. He's a big corner. So, I think he could definitely play some significant snaps for Indy this coming season. So, all right, let's move on now to safety out of Cal, Daniel Scott, another 5th round pick, a couple picks later here for Indianapolis. What kind of impact do you have for him?
I would say, I'm going to say definitely around a 5. I know that Daniel Scott, he'll most likely be the 4th safety in this room. And he's going to be primarily a special teamer, right? Like that's going to be his role, I would imagine, going into this. And there's just not much more room to fill with that. Maybe even a 6 if you want to implement that special teams is that important because he is going to play, which I could probably understand the argument for, because if like it's different between him and Freeland, because Freeland may not play at all versus Daniel Scott actually being able to play a lot of these snaps with the special teams. So 5, 6, probably go in that area.
Yeah, special teams. That was kind of why I had him a little bit up there with the 5 or 6 as well, just because he's going to play significant snaps right away. And Chris Ballard didn't necessarily shut the door on him potentially seeing some snaps at safety. So that is in the back. Well, I think it probably won't happen as much. I think that is still something that is to be considered, because really, I mean, outside of Rodney Thomas, Derek, who do you really have back there? I mean, Julian Blackman, I guess, but there's a lot of potential opportunity, especially if, like we saw last year, when the Colts kind of needed another safety and Nick Cross wasn't ready, right? Rodney McLeod stepped into that. So is there a potential opportunity for Daniel Scott to get a look if, again, Nick Cross isn't ready still for some reason? You never know, but it'll be interesting to see nonetheless kind of how he factors in. Tight end Will Mallory out of Miami was the second to last 5th round pick here for the Colts. Definitely a need that we didn't see necessarily for the Colts, but they add some speed to their tight end room. He was the fastest 40 time of any tight end in this draft class. Talk to me about Will Mallory.
Oh man, I don't know. It's really hard for me to It's hard for me because, again, we have so many tight ends right now that it's hard for me to find a way to think that Will Mallory will find time with this group because, I mean, obviously, you still have Mo Alley Cox, you have Jelani Woods, you have Kylan Granson, and then you have Drew Ogletree, who you presume might make it. I mean, Will Mallory, at best, is going to be the fourth tight end in this room. And he may not get a lot of chances with that being the case because Molly Cox is still there. Jelani Woods is the true bona fide number one tight end moving forward with the Indianapolis Colts because of his skill set. And then Kylan Granson is just basically a slightly smaller Will Mallory. So I'm just thinking of it from that perspective, and I'm just saying, where in this does Will Mallory get opportunity? So I'm as it stands right now, I'll go with a 4. Like, because I just don't see a time in which Will Mallory's going to get on the football field. Now, obviously, through training camp, if Will Mallory lights the hell up out of this thing, then obviously we could see a situation where maybe he jumps Granson. Maybe they move Mo Alley Cox back because Mo Alley Cox is not the same athlete as any of these guys are. Maybe that's something that happens, but it's just one of those situations where I don't know if I could see it.
Sure. That makes sense. All right. Let's move on now to the last 5th round pick. The Colts had 176 overall from the Stefan Gilmore trade, Northwestern running back Evan Hall.
I mean, again, you have Jonathan Taylor, you have Zach Moss. So your number 1 and number 2 are already there. And then you got to compete with guys like Deion Jackson, who, over the last several years has shown he's a guy that can really catch balls out of the backfield and run really hard behind an offensive line. So I like Evan Hall. I like him as a person. I think he's a fantastic, well-spoken man. I just am wondering again, how is it going to work when it comes to the group and everything else. And running back is such a difficult thing to get into if you're not going to be a bona fide number 1 or number 2. I'll do the same thing as I did with Will Mallory. I'll go with a 4. Just not 100% certain yet on what's going to be of Evan Hall.
I think I look at Evan Hall and I say, this guy led the college football in catches for a running back last year. So that's nothing to just ignore. So for me, I'm going to go 5 or 6 just because, I think he's going to beat out Deion Jackson. I just think he offers you so much more from a receiving back stand, and that is such a critical role. We've seen it in Shane Steichen's systems the last couple of years. There's such a critical role for that third running back. Not that he can't do that in Deion Jackson, but Evan Hall just does it so much better. So I just kind of view that as Deion Jackson had a chance to show something last year in terms of the receiving department when Nyheim Hines got shipped out. He really didn't. So, how much of that is just the Colts offense and the ineptitude last year versus Deion Jackson? I don't know. It really would be one that I'm going to monitor a whole lot during training camp, probably one of my most important position battles that nobody's talking about. And I'm really looking forward to that as well. So just for that sake, I think he's going to get used. He's obviously not going to be the starter, and he's not probably going to see a ton of snaps, but I think he's going to see a decent amount. And I think he's going to be used in that way and kind of add a new wrinkle to the Colts offense with Shane Steichen. So I'm just going to go probably that for Evan Hall. Now let's move on now to the 1 6th round pick and the pair of 7th round picks that the Colts had. I want to talk about Titus Leo, guy to Wagner, defensive end. What are your thoughts on him?
It's so interesting because, again, I am so clueless on just what Titus Leo can actually do. Obviously, a physical athlete, to say the least, on that edge, so big, so strong, so fast. We'll see how he does with, not having played in, a Division III school, how he does with it. I mean, Ballard has definitely tried multiple years in a row where he goes for these small school guys to try to mix in with this. I'll probably do the same thing that I would do when it comes to uh, Will and Evan. Probably go with a 4 again. I'm just still not finding 100% certainty on where he would mix in with this, especially since Indianapolis loaded up a lot with the defensive linemen this year. So it'll be hard to see him find a spot.
I would probably go 2 or 3 just because I think he's going to be practice squad. I didn't really see a role for him on the active 53 man. This is the first player that I would say I don't really see much of a chance of him making the final 53 man unless he just lights the world on fire in training camp and in preseason and he's just killing people. And he was productive in college, but again, making the leap up from Wagner to the NFL is a huge leap. So, that is something that he's going to have to do, just like EJ Speed did a couple years ago. So, that is definitely something I'm going to be kind of monitoring is like Titus Leo and because I don't know a whole lot about him outside of the little bit of tape and a little bit of things we've heard about him. So I'll be intrigued by that, but I think he's practice squad. All right, let's move on now to the next guy. The first guy in the 7th round, Texas A&M corner, Jalen Jones.
Jalen Jones, I could see a situation where I'll probably go with a 5 for Jalen Jones because I see the potential for Jalen Jones to round out the remainder of the cornerback group and probably could get a few snaps here and there because of his intangibles and the way that the scouts talk about him. So I would probably go with a 5 for Jalen Jones and his potential to get a few this year.
I think so. I think he's going to be battling like Dallas Flowers, Tony Brown, back there for the back end of the roster. Now, obviously, Dallas Flowers probably has a leg up just because he played in the system a year and he also can, provide some stuff in the return department. So, but I'll probably go 4 or 5 here for Jalen Jones just because, you're right. I mean, he's a big corner, physical corner. He's, played in the SEC, and all that stuff. But like, there's so many other corners here. I'll just be intrigued to see kind of where he fits in here. But for right now, I'll go with that. And then let's talk about the last guy here, Northern Michigan offensive tackle, Jake Witt.
I'll probably go the same thing as I did with Freeland at a 5. It's just all going to depend on if something were to happen to Braden Smith or to Bernard Ryman. And that's just ultimately going to depend on whether or not Jake Witt is going to get any potential playing time.
See, I view him as a practice squad guy, so I'm going to go 2 or 3. I'm going to go probably similar to him. Him and Titus Leo will probably be the 2 practice squad guys for me right away. And I just kind of figure, and then they can afford to do that, right? Both these guys are projects. Obviously Titus Leo is more of the small school guy. I guess Jake Witt is as well here, but, Jake Witt's a guy that a lot of people view as like, take a flyer on him, let him develop, and he could turn into something. So I don't necessarily see him being a roster guy. Maybe he is that 4th tackle, but I definitely think he'll probably be right around the practice squad, and the Colts will try to develop him and kind of tap into some of that talent that they've seen because he's so raw and so fresh. He's really not played a whole lot of games at offensive tackle. So I'm intrigued to see kind of him down the line, but I think immediate impact, probably go 2 or 3. All right. Cool. All right, guys. Well, thank you so much. Let us know your thoughts overall on all of these picks and their potential day 1 impact for the Indianapolis Colts. Do you agree with what I said? Do you agree with maybe with what Derek said on some picks? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. But that will do it for this one, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, guys, go Colts.